Ticker News bills itself as the world's first native fast channel news network. The Melbourne, Australia-based company has been around for 4 years and says it has a global viewership of 3.2 million monthly. Ticker News produces between 3 and 9 hours of daily news programming, along with 2 weekly 15-minute mini documentaries from its micro bureaus, one of which is now located in New York. The organization is presently trying to make inroads in the US and broaden the array of fast channel options on which it iterates. It hopes that its take, leaning into context and analysis on major global stories, and its younger-leaning target demographic will help it gain momentum on these shores. I'm Michael Depp, editor of TV News Check, and this is Talking TV. Today, a conversation with Ahron Young, CEO of Ticker News, about its unusual platform strategy and its content value proposition. We'll be right back. Talking TV is brought to you by Futuri's post-podcasting system. Last year, U.S. podcasting revenues grew 22% to $1.8 billion. When you compare podcasting with other forms of media, it continues to be one of the fastest growing digital channels. With Post by Futuri, you can add a podcasting element to your local newscasts and tap into that growth opportunity. Learn more about Post at futurimedia.com/post4tv. Welcome, Ahron Young.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for having us.
Ahron, why the name Ticker News first? Is this a reference to a news ticker kind of on the bottom of the screen?
I think so, but also I love the idea of news with heart. I had been working for a corporation, and I think, like so many of us in the news industry, we've been watching what's been happening over the last probably 10 years. I often say to people, where did the idea of Ticker come from? They'll ask me, and I often point to your website, would you believe, because as an avid viewer from all the way over here in Australia for probably the last 10 or so years, ever since I discovered that you guys existed, it's been a regular digest of ongoing change in the industry in so many ways, and not always great ways, right? And as a journalist, it felt like it was time to put my money where my mouth was.
So why is Ticker News a fast-first news organization?
We were first fast before we knew what fast was, to be honest. When you look back to mid-2019, it wasn't exactly a four-letter word that people were talking about. We were definitely in the linear game. We were in streaming. Streaming was exciting, not just because of Netflix and some of all the things that were happening in 2019, but for the first time, you didn't have to have a satellite in the sky or a huge antenna on top of a building to be a broadcaster. We were in a world of niches. And so we found ourselves in a place. And as we continued to speak to different platforms and partners around the world, the word fast started to come together, and we're actually a fast channel before we actually even knew we were one.
And where can viewers find Ticker News currently, if they're looking?
So we started off, obviously, I'm a Melbourne Australian. I've lived here for most of my life, aside from a year in Russia and another year in the UK when I was younger, would you believe? And that meant that, my love for Australia was fantastic, but I call it the Olivia Newton-John strategy, which is if you want to make it big here, you've got to make it big overseas first. And so that kind of belief in what we were doing was truly unique for platforms. And it didn't have to be something that was trapped in a geographical area. We see our audience as almost stateless. They are international citizens. They travel a lot. So we had to be in as many places as possible. So to answer your question, right across Europe, in the United States, obviously here in Australia, throughout Asia, on different platforms. I could go through naming them all. They're on our website, obviously, but the big platforms like Samsung TV Plus, Fubo, we're about to join Sling in the United States. We have ongoing conversations. In Australia, it's Telstra TV and Fetch, which is in millions of homes combined, Flash, which is News Corp's Australian news aggregator, and we just continually add different platforms.
Now, many TV news operations and even some newspapers and digitally native news organizations are launching fast channels, but they're doing so in more of an ancillary way. So they're a companion to the iterations that they already have on numerous other platforms. And most look at fast channels as more of a passive, smaller revenue stream that draws most of that revenue from programmatic ads. Is that the case
Yeah.
with Ticker?
No, we kind of look at it the opposite way around, actually. So these companies, I'm aware of them. It feels like every day a new one launches, and you kind of have to keep looking at the business plan saying we're going to be okay, right? And I think that that has been in our DNA, is that we were designed not to be an old-fashioned company dipping our toe in to different things, right? There are big media companies still relying on cable who can have the money to just try things. Let's throw everything at Snapchat or Instagram, and oh, that didn't work. It didn't make any money, but hey, it's okay. Our view is you have to be in everything, but you have to keep your cost base low. And working in fast and being a fast first channel means that there is plenty of scope. Our audience continues to grow between 10 and 20% month on month, which is the numbers we get from these fast platforms. But in terms of revenue, we know it's going to be a slow burn to rely on fast. But what other choice is there? I mean, look what's happening to cable. Look what's happening to traditional advertising. For us, essentially, it's preparing us for a future where there will be a lot of players, and the way to survive is to stay pretty slim.
Are you relying wholly on programmatic right now, or is the advertising direct sold
Oh,
anywhere in the
gosh.
world?
If we were reliant on programmatic right now, I probably wouldn't be able to afford this show. We, from the very beginning, had to make sure that we had a really diversified revenue stream, because when we started, as I say, programmatic was a dream that would even happen, getting on platforms. You know, it was like you have a choice. Remember speaking to someone who was looking to invest in Ticker in the very beginning, and she said to me, you know, Ahron, we don't invest in media businesses that rely on advertising or subscription. And I said, honey, what else is there? And she said, honey, you tell me. So I jumped on my bike and said, I'm not going to start this business until we can come up with a different revenue stream, a different way of finding ways to make money. And the first thing that really happened was on day one, I had about 1,000 emails from different PR pitchers saying, we really want to get our clients out there. And we had a lot of interviews in those first few weeks. And what we realized is that they all wanted access to those interview clips to be able to put it on their LinkedIn, to put it on all their different platforms and things. And that was it. That was part of our business strategy, was to be, I suppose, the home of business from around the world, trying to tell the world what they do, and also to, I suppose, elevate themselves to be thought leaders in that. That's part of our commercial. It's not a huge part of what we do, because
just to clarify, you're basically describing video native advertising then?
yeah, exactly. So people who come on, tell me about your business, tell me about the industry that you're in, what are you seeing as a change, be a thought leader, etc. That's probably about 5% of our on-air programming, far less than traditional advertising, but it pays a lot more than programmatic.
So since you're spread out across the world, at least for your viewership, who's doing the selling? Are you just working with outside contractors in strategic locations? I mean, you know, the world's a big.
So we have a bunch of different sales teams in different countries. Sometimes they compete against each other to sell Ticker to different platforms and to different advertisers. We have our own home-based sales team as well here in Melbourne that deals with different companies where we do kind of co-branded programming. It's very obvious to the viewer, but we might talk about, for example, we've got a show, Funding Futures, about people who are young, who are looking to invest, what's the best way to go, etc. So we want it to be very editorial. It just happens to be sponsored by a company. But again, that isn't the huge way of making money. In this world, you've got to balance, as you know, viewers who want to watch with advertisers who want everything. And if you give the advertisers everything, you can lose your viewers. So you've got to make sure that you get the balance right. We've spent a lot of time getting that.
So how does that revenue pie break down, say, programmatic versus native versus, or is native, I suppose, the only kind of direct sold, or do you also direct sell just conventional advertising?
We've looked at heaps of different ways. So obviously, when you're running a small media business which is growing, you're trying to find different ways to, anything, right? And you know that programmatic will work, but that's all based on volume, and volume. It can be really hard to be able to give the advertisers the exact numbers the exact day that they need them. That's been the biggest issue with the fast industry. I was at a conference in Las Vegas where another fast person said, can you tell me how many women over 35 are watching my channel in the 3 biggest markets? Because no one seems to be able to tell me that. That's an ongoing issue for the industry. For us, we're able to break it down thanks to our EDMs, thanks to, a lot of the research we do about our audience as well, to work out who are they, where are they, how are they watching, and how long are they watching for, and to be able to give that to our advertisers too.
Okay. All right. That's the business side. Let's look at the journalism product. I understand right now.
My favorite part, by the way.
All of our favorite parts in some ways. You got about 8 reporters, I've been told, fanned out across these micro bureaus across the world. It's a big world, and that's not a lot of people. So how do you use these journalists in a way that creates value for viewers?
Well, because we don't just rely on our journalists. We've had reporters in Singapore, we've had people in Paris and in London, and we've had reporters that we've paid for to travel into Kyiv. We've had reporters who have been, as you mentioned, we've got an anchor who's in New York hosting a daily program. We also work with a whole bunch of other places too. Speaking as a journalist, just relying on getting your news through the old-fashioned ways of journalists and politicians and policemen, there are so many citizen journalists out there these days that you can rely on during that breaking news. The fact is that we didn't want to just be a breaking news channel. We worked out very quickly, as you just said, that is, there's plenty of people doing that. There's CNN, there's all these fantastic legacy broadcasters with so much history that there is no point launching a company to try and compete with them. What we try to do is actually add conversation and context to what's happening. There's so much assumed knowledge in journalism that people know what we're talking about when we go on air. So we actually decided to bring in all these different programs. I host a bunch of shows, Ticker Today every day, for example. In America Today is hosted by Veronica Dudo out of New York. She's ex-CNN and NBC and worked for a bunch of different places. So what we worked out was that if we interview people about these topics into a bit more detail, kind of like The Economist magazine, for example, it's not exactly news of right now. It's talking about and giving context to events happening. And that is something that I think you can do with 3 people, so long as they're really good. You can do it with as many people or as few people. Right now, we're seeing redundancies happening right across the media landscape. It's safe to say that a huge team is going to be with legacy, but it seems to be a world of pain there.
Well, yes, but okay, so let's just kind of drill into that value proposition a little bit further then, because so if that proposition is to bring context and analysis, of course, a lot of other news organizations have plenty of that too. CNN has, and God knows, loads of analysis, as does Fox News, MSNBC, all the and for that matter, local news often has elements of context or analysis. So what's different about how that plays out at Ticker News? Can you give me an example and drill into something specific about how your particular brand of analytical discussion or contextualization might look?
Well, I think for one, it's about being multi-platform, right? So you've got the journalism side, which I'll talk about in a minute, but it's also realizing in what I believe is the create it once, use it many times. So for example, this morning I had 4 interviews with 4 different people about 8 different topics that are news at the moment. So from today, the big story was Hunter Biden, obviously the submarine, which has been missing, and trying to work out I guess the story from the business angle or from the tech angle of what's been happening here. So we don't cover general news the way that perhaps CNN does. We focus on the business side or the political side or the tech side, depending on what angle we can actually bring to the story. We don't want our website to look exactly the same as everybody else's. We don't want to be adding another voice just for the sake of it. We want to actually look at a different side to the story. But the traditional way is to have a reporter in Boston to be going live on the hour, saying the same thing all the time and waiting for something to come through. I see that from a business side as probably a bit inefficient, the way that things are today, and to actually have a team of experts who we can call upon at any time when that is happening, that is something that we can do, and to put it out really quickly in as many different places as possible. We obviously want to increase our original reporting, which is why we have documentaries. So we will have a full show about a topic, which will be backed up by a documentary that our team turns around within a couple of days. So the submarine, it's kind of like that hive belief of throwing absolutely everything at it as it's happening.
So these are short, as I mentioned at the top, they're twice weekly, with 15-minute or so documentaries typically.
Yeah, and it's basically to give a bit more context to something that we find interesting. So our viewers love Elon Musk. Our viewers love Richard Branson. Our viewers are 25 to 45, predominantly male. They might work for one of the big four consultancy firms. They might work for a big bank or an airline. They love aviation. And so they're kind of looking for things that can sit on YouTube, can sit as a podcast, can sit on our website, and be on our FAST network as well. And I think that's the key point. Everything that goes on our FAST platform is also being repurposed at the exact same time. It goes on YouTube the same time that it goes on the FAST network. We don't prioritize the television side more than we do any other part.
So on a document, let's say Elon Musk, I mean, there's loads of content about Elon Musk that's exegetic in length, video and text. So what, in 15 minutes, just with this one, for example, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to, is it sort of diving into one element, recency with Twitter, for instance, or, how do you make a 15-minute documentary about a massive subject be effective?
Well, we can have a bit of fun with it. We did our first documentary. I think we've got about 5 on Elon Musk right now that we've put together over the past couple of months. But the first one was called Billionaire Blowups. And it was about billionaires. Elizabeth Holmes was one of them. Kanye West was another. But Elon Musk led it. And it was kind of about how he's got the power and the money to be able to go, bang, I'm going to just do something like buy Twitter and just see what happens and blow up some rockets because, hey, I can do that. Now, what happens to that documentary? It doesn't just go on our platforms, but the platforms that I mentioned, for example, Samsung TV or Rakuten across Europe, they actually highlight that because it's in the news. So while everybody else might have a news story that is going with that, we have our documentary sitting right there. So not only do we have our news interviews about what might be happening that day, but we have the documentary sitting there. And also when we have a big story about Elon Musk, and he quite often leads our programming because, as I say, it's something that people are talking about. We make sure the documentaries are actually attached in our programming strategy for the FAST channel that then allows people to watch that first 15 minutes about what's happened today and the second 15 minutes straight away from those documentaries as well.
Okay. So what are you hoping to be the business trajectory here?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that we want to be the safe place for fast channels, right? So I think that over the past few years, maybe longer than that, maybe 10, 15 years, a lot of news networks have kind of shifted left or shifted right. They've had to find a niche, but the niche has been politics. My view is there is a huge group of people who don't watch those sorts of networks because they're not really that political. They don't mind politics, but it doesn't make them angry. They don't have a side. What they have is a keen interest in world events. What they have is an interest in technology and business. And we want to be the place for them. So we're not trying to be like a news nation, trying to find a place between CNN and et cetera. We don't really look at that. We love that, but I find that interesting as a journalist. But I think that from the business side of what we need to do, we need to provide an alternative. And that is for people who are flicking through and watching a political interview and saying, no, it's not quite for me, moving on to something else and finding maybe a documentary with us or finding an interview with someone who can break down what's happening with the Fed Reserve at the moment, when interest rates going to change, but talking to an audience that is looking to buy a house. So many of the news conversations happening in newsrooms these days is our audience is old. They already own their house. They're not worried about paying their mortgage. They're worried about their superannuation, as we call it here in Australia, their 401k. So I think that making sure that we appeal to a younger audience that has all the devices, has the TV in the lounge room, the iPhone or whatever it might be in their hand, and they're, I guess, consuming media in different ways. We want to try to be in as many places as possible as quickly as we can.
And are you looking to staff up, widen the coverage net, or deepen what you're already doing?
I call this a bit of the AUKUS network. So AUKUS is the alliance between Australia, the UK, and the US, which was announced a couple of years ago from a military standpoint. We love the United States. That's why we built our first actual anchoring studio from there with Veronica. And then we've gone, we're looking at the UK as well. Thankfully, the time zones make it really easy, but we also, to be able to program news for people watching at a certain time of day. So in America today, can be broadcast in prime time, US time. We have Australian content when America's asleep, for example, and British content in the late afternoon, Australia time, as the UK is starting to wake up still when the United States is asleep. So we program our hours based on where people are. So yeah, we want to open in the UK. We definitely want to staff up across the United States. We love the US. Obviously, so many stories that happen there are of interest to the very people that we're looking at around the world.
And from a distribution standpoint, is it your goal to just stay in the fast lane? I can't believe I just said that horrible line.
Gosh, I'm going to put that in my pitch deck. That's fantastic.
Now I'm kicking myself for that. But are you going to stay there, or do you want, I know you have a website as well, you can watch it there, but do you aim to have a more conventional OTT channel with a VOD options, or what's the play there?
You probably can't see behind me, but yeah, we've got Apple TV. We've got, anywhere that there's a place to put an app. We've been working with Comcast, NBC on apps for them. I think it has launched. I keep asking our team, has it launched yet? But you know what these things are like, everything takes time. Our view is that we just want to be where eyeballs are. And if they'll take us, we'd be happy to be on. Our aim is to provide news that is happening at the moment to as many people in a different format. We don't have, the kind of billionaire backers, but we do believe in a really good story. And I think that storytelling means everything to a viewer who doesn't have much time. And that's basically how we want to go. So whether it's traditional cable, sure. Whether it's fast, absolutely. But we found a great home in fast. I think that the way that we're seeing connected TVs continue to grow, the way we're seeing more viewers shifting across, looking for, particularly as we're on the cusp of recession, as we're seeing more viewers making their way across to other options. We're somewhere that we're self-sufficient. We're not trying to use your email to sign up, etc. We found a sustainable business model. We just want you to watch.
I'm kind of picking up some resonances of Cheddar News here with looking for a closest correlate from what your ambitions seem to be. But okay, well, Ahron,
it's interesting. Yeah, no, it's really interesting you say that. So I was aware of Cheddar back 4 years ago when I started Ticker. I think it kind of the lessons from Cheddar are fantastic for us because they're always going to be 4 years ahead of where we are. I know quite a few people at Cheddar, quite a few people have worked for Cheddar, and I hold them up the same way that I hold up a CNN or an NBC. But I think the point is that what John Steinberg did was absolutely fantastic. It was kind of the first time that a Cheddar had been launched, a streaming news network. What it taught me was you could be an independent news network and really make a go at it. The difference is we don't have our studios on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Markets isn't in my DNA. News, world news is in my DNA. So I think that a bit like how KFC and McDonald's are both fast food chains, you can be on the same street, but we certainly sell different things.
Right. Different kinds of chicken. Okay. Well, Ahron Young, it is a very interesting model. Thanks for being here today to talk about it.
Thanks so much for your time, Michael.
Talking TV is back most Fridays with a new episode, and all of the episodes are on tvnewscheck.com and on our YouTube channel. We've also got an audio version in all of the places you find podcasts if straight up listening is more your thing. Thank you for watching and listening to this one. See you next time. A new episode of Talking TV is available most Fridays on tvnewscheck.com. You can also listen and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and Spotify.